Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of...
Differently, it's because I am on Skype today, and it's been a while since I've used Skype, so I don't have the normal settings to tell me when the recording started and all of that. Anyway, our guest today is Onaiza Drabu, and she's coming to us from Kashmir, I believe. Well, you're not in Kashmir, are you?
Today, I'm not in Kashmir, but I was last week, and that's where I am for most of the time. But hello.
Right. Hi. I only guessed you weren't in Kashmir based on the time difference. Anyway, not important, as most of you may have figured out. We're going to talk today about some of the folklore and legends of Kashmir, and I want to give credit to Ragesh from Black Publishing Communications for setting this up and making this so. For those of you who didn't catch the show where Ragesh was our guest, it was several shows again, and it was the 2023 version of the folklore myths and monsters of India, and he supplies with a couple of other guests that are forthcoming as well. So that's going to be fun. And like most people, probably I didn't know much about Kashmir, probably still don't. I know the song by Led Zeppelin, which there's a pretty good chance it's going to be the outro. And I know that it's a disputed region between Pakistan and India. And while that's largely on, I believe, religious grounds, it probably has more to do with controlling the headwaters of a river or something like that, as that is often the case in disputed areas. And I learned that from a book anyway. So here I go blathering along like I normally do, but let's introduce and say hi to Onaiza. How are you today?
I'm good. Yeah, I am really good. I'm really excited about this because, I haven't done a podcast in a while, so I'm really excited for this.
Excellent. So tell the folks a little bit about yourself. You know, what's your yes. educational background, your professional background, what got you into this, stuff like that.
So I'm an anthropologist, and I'm a business anthropologist for most part of my life. And I studied business and then I studied anthropology. So I kind of blended the two, and what pays my bills is doing corporate anthropology. So I consult for businesses, help them look at semiotics, help them look at brand propositions and so on. So I use a lot of ethnography methods to help solve business problems. But really, because I'm an anthropologist, I do a lot of other work in this space, and that leads me to folklore, and that leads me to language, and that leads me to Kashmir, which is my home. That's what I do. I work a lot with everything Kashmir. So I run a small business that is inspired by Kashmiri arts and crafts traditions. I run a South Asian literature business-ish. It's an enterprise, which is inspired by, literature and translation. So I do a bunch of different things, but really, because I'm an anthropologist, I'm interested in folklore. And because you mentioned Kashmir, and you mentioned it's a disputed territory between India and Pakistan, and, there's a lot happening there. But what is at the core of this sort of, this desire to not identify as either India or Pakistan is this very, very strong ethnic identity. The Kashmiris feel very strongly about their culture, about who they are as people. And a lot of that is linked to the Kashmiri language. And that's what I work a lot on. I started researching on Kashmiri folklore 10 years ago. I was in my early 20s. I was looking for things that I heard when I was growing up in the Kashmiri language, and these were stories, these were proverbs, idioms, the way people talk. And as I grew a bit older, I saw a lot of that disappearing. I saw that, English was coming in as the main language for school kids. Urdu was replacing Kashmiri slowly, and a lot of the very, very local indigenous stories were sort of being lost in a sense because, there was no YouTube when we were growing up, and it was still a grandmother telling a grandchild a story. And a lot of those grandmothers now don't remember the stories anymore because Kashmir's had a traumatic recent history. The last 30, 40 years have been really rough on the people, and there's a lot of PTSD, and there's a lot of dementia and very high Alzheimer's in the aging population. So there's also a sort of a loss of stories in the culture. And I have a very personal story here. So my grandmother has dementia, and she's really been the source of a lot of culture which was passed down orally. One thing about the Kashmiri language is that it's an oral language. So because it was passed down orally across generations, not a lot of people read and write it. There's not, the state language has always been something else over the last 700 years. And so because this language existed so prominently in the oral space, I saw in my own house, it disappear. A lot of things disappear. A lot of sentence structures disappear. A lot of the way we talk disappear. It became more global. I wrote an essay about this. And then I realized that I think this is probably time to start documenting some of these stories. And I sort of began doing digital blog and so on, which 5-7 years later then became a book. And that's what really got me interested in Kashmiri literature and Kashmiri folklore. So Kashmiri folklore was sort of the gateway to Kashmiri literature for me. I will pause if you want me to, but if not, I can just continue going.
No, I think it's a good time to pause. I mean, first you had me at business anthropologist, but I think I figured out sort of what you're talking about there. I mean, I was going to make a stupid joke about, what do you sell to Homo neanderthalis versus Homo heidelbergalis or whatever. But when you mentioned that there's been a lot of trauma in for the Kashmiri people, this is not what the show is about necessarily, but I think it would be a wasted opportunity if I didn't ask you to just give sort of, I hate to do this because it's going to give short shrift to the situation, but what's the Cliff Notes version of what's the issues there, just to give listeners some context? Because my guess is that 95 out of 100 of them will have my knowledge base or less of what's going on there, which is pretty small.
Yeah. So what's been happening in Kashmir over the last many, many years? For 700 years, Kashmir has been ruled by people who are not ethnically Kashmiri, people who are not from there. So whether it was the Mughals, whether it was the Afghans, these were like big empires in India, the Sikhs, the Dogras, and then the British. And then the British in a very short, and I'm just going to really summarize this, and this is going to be really awful. But when the British sort of left India, Kashmir was a princely state, which meant that the ruler could choose who he allies with, whether it was India or Pakistan. Now, Kashmir was a Muslim majority state with a Hindu ruler, and precedent said that the population, if the population is Hindu majority, or it goes with India, if the population is Muslim majority, it goes with Pakistan. And so the ruler was, he was in two minds, not deciding till the very last minute, and then, long story short, signed an instrument of accession to India, on the condition that at some point in the near future there would be a plebiscite, which would, which the people of Kashmir would decide whether they want to go to India or to Pakistan, and this would be a UN monitored plebiscite, and that never happened. And there was lots of resentment building up all the way to the 90s, when there was an independence movement and a resistance movement against India, and that was a militant movement. It was an insurgent, they call it an insurgent movement in India, but it was a resistance movement. And that was squashed by India using very brutal, really awful methods, torture, rape, violence, just lots. So it was a very rough time. When I was growing up, there were like bombs everywhere. I mean, not everywhere, but there'd be like an attack here, bombs there, encounters there. And I think what happened since the 1990s to the early 2000s was a really terrible period where a lot of people were killed, went missing. There was like there was military rule, but also on an everyday, every home would have army men barge in, check everything. If someone was hiding someone, there were like lots of enforced disappearances. A lot of women actually whose husbands or sons were taken away, and particularly husbands were taken away, they never heard from them again. So obviously they were killed, there were mass graves and so on. And they were called half widows because the government never gave them the answer of whether their husbands did die or not. So it's interesting that we're talking about this, because one of my projects after doing the folklore project was to sort of retell retell Kashmiri folk tales through the conflict, because a lot of the characters, the demons, and so on that emerge are things we have seen, although in different forms. They're very, very tangible. I can put a face and name to some of the monsters, to some of the demons, to some of their tactics. I just never did it because I think it was too visceral and it was a bit hard to do it.
Well, I think you
But
should.
really,
That's,
these were-
A24 may do a movie on. Yeah, the interesting thing is, I don't mean to cut you off, is that as you were saying this, I was realizing how little I had known about the history of. I mean, listen, when I was a kid, we had a pretty progressive social studies teacher, and we learned about India and the British colonization, et cetera, to an extent. She took the class trip to we saw Gandhi, very good. Pretty impressive for a U.S. school, but that really wasn't. I mean, I'm not sure that most people in the United States even heard of Afghanistan until the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. Now, of course, everyone knows Afghanistan, and I knew nothing about the British partition, the India and Pakistan. I mean, again, a lot of the names of these countries are sort of artificial from British, but some of them are real and in the minds of the peoples who live there. It's just the formalization of the countries came later, and borders were sort of artificially drawn. But it was the Marvel show, Miss Marvel, that that clarified that Pakistan and India were one country. There was a civil war. Most of the Muslims moved to Pakistan, and then they had a civil war between East Pakistan, and that became Bangladesh. And I didn't know any of that. And maybe I'm admitting I'm a big dummy, but I also think that I don't think that most people in my part of the world knew that either, because I had a pretty good education. So this is all very timely, which is more to say I think that you should absolutely continue with your project, and I think that if you turn the monsters into metaphors for the reality of it, that seems like a movie that A24, the studio, might pick up, and then you'll become a big, rich, famous person.
Isn't that the dream? But really, what you were saying about not knowing enough about it, to be honest, I think mainland India doesn't know enough about it. I've actually stopped engaging in conversations with Indians. I hold an Indian passport or whatever, but in Kashmir, we sort of see ourselves as a little bit of, it's a bit complicated. But when people not from Kashmir actually speak to me about Kashmir, it just blows my mind, because I'm like, it's right there. You think it belongs to your country. You think it's yours. And you don't know anything about the history. You don't know anything about what's happening on the ground. You don't know anything about the people. And I mean, 4 years ago, now they revoked the Article 370, which gave Kashmir like a special status within the Indian state. Some autonomy, largely token, but some autonomy within the Indian state. And when that was revoked, Indians were celebrating. They were like, "Oh, now Kashmir is suddenly safe again. Now we can go to Kashmir. Now we can buy land in Kashmir." Like all of this really problematic narrative that came up at that point. So really not surprising. And just as an addition to that, it's also a complicated time in India to talk about these things because the government is. The government is a bit difficult with what we can say, what we cannot say, what goes out, what doesn't go out, especially on media. So we'll definitely continue. We'll definitely write about it. Will it come out soon? Maybe, maybe not.
It's very interesting.
But even when
some of what you said is very interesting to me, and because when people talk of colonization, they pretty much think of European colonization. But and certainly that happened. But what it sounds like here from the outside world, if you hear about Indians moving into Kashmir, I think from the outside world, it's like, big deal, Indians moving into India. But from a Kashmiri perspective, and maybe even an Indian perspective, not exactly. I mean, it's Indians are colonizing Kashmir. Now, I understand some Indians saying, well, it's India, it's ours, it's a summer house or whatever. Or there's, an untapped market there for, I don't know, I sell watches, whatever, it doesn't matter. But from Kashmir, you say they're coming into our land. So, and it's one of these things that I've sort of stumbled upon in the show is that everybody colonizes everyone, and sometimes it's called conquest, sometimes it's called migration, sometimes it's called immigration. The longer back it goes in history, the more romanticized it sort of is. That it's always been peaceful, and there was definitely no one here in the Americas when the people came 13,000 years ago. Whoops, we found out there were people here 17,000 years ago. Whoops, we found out there were people here 23,000 years ago. Whoops, it looks like there's probably were people here older than 30,000 and they came through different parts. So, even our First Nations aren't necessarily First Nations, or at least not all of them. It's just tough. Anyway, I wanted to get off of my soapbox on that, but I did want to confirm a couple things. And this is like basic, but I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Kashmir would be basically in the northwest part of India and in the far eastern part of Pakistan, and I don't think necessarily southeast, but I could be wrong about that. I just think because Pakistan is higher up longitude-wise or latitude lines than most of India.
So I would, yes. So for India, it's the top north actually. So north central, like it's really quite, the top bit. And I don't know if I can show you a picture, but like the right at the top. I don't know if you can see it, but anyway, it's the square-ish head of India.
Yeah, like
it's the square head of India. Yeah.
So like a smaller version of like South America, where there's almost like a little triangular part at the top, but with a toe at the shape.
Yes. And for Pakistan as well, it's really the north. And the map is disputed as well because technically the map that India shows as Kashmir and as its territory in Kashmir actually is partially Pakistan, partially China. So it's all a bit complicated. It's all a bit controversial. So we'll not talk about politics, but let's talk about language now.
Well, before we get to politics, is it all ethnic and religious, or is there? Am I right? Is there like a river or something strategic that's really at the heart of what everybody really wants?
Yes and no. So I think more than anything, it is sort of an ego battle between India and Pakistan, because it's now both of them actually express the language they use to express Kashmir is really sort of very bodily. They use bodily metaphors. So for Pakistan, they call it their jugular vein, and India calls it their crown, the crown on their head or something like that. So they use really bodily metaphors in this sort of really awful ego tussle. There's the river as well. There's the water thing as well.
It's always water.
but it is really very much this ego battle between these two states, because it's a matter of pride at this point, because it's been going on for so long. It is an ego tussle.
So let's go to the language then, because you said it's a oral language, not, I guess, not a written language. So what's that? Is that technically called a dialect, or is it called an isolate, or does it matter?
No, it is a language. It is now written, but it's most often transmitted orally. But because Kashmir is at the intersection of, it was on the Silk Route, so a lot of it, they had a lot of sort of Silk Route interaction. So a lot of people from Tibet came there, Central Asia. People from Central Asia came and brought Islam, actually. And there was a big influx of Sufi saints. And then it was a center of Buddhism at some point. It's a big center for Hinduism, Shaivism. So a lot of the language has Persian influences, Sanskrit influences, Arab influences. You'll find words from Punjabi, you'll find words from Hindi. But essentially, it's an Indo-Dardic language, which I suppose closely resembles the hill languages of northern Pakistan. So that's what it is. It used to be written in the Nastaliq script, which is the Persian script. Increasingly now, that's also changing because Kashmir has a majority Muslim population, but a significant Hindu population, which eventually in the 1990s had to sort of move out.
We're both having allergy attacks now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something going on.
In winter.
So in winter. It's probably the dryness. Yeah, I don't know what it is. But sorry, so now, because the identity politics has taken sort of a turn, now the Muslims write it in the Persian script, the Hindus write it in the Hindi script. However, not a lot of people write it now. Because it's an oral language, because Kashmiris were never in power in Kashmir, the state always imposed its language. Most Kashmiris were also not very well educated, so they didn't really have positions in court, and if they did, they spoke either Persian or Urdu or the languages before that. So because it was such a oral language, and it continues to be, it's the language on the streets. And because also, even in the last 30, 40 years, whatever we read in history books in sort of, because our history textbooks, our school textbooks come from India, a lot of content comes from India. A lot of the things you learn about the conflict as well are oral history, because there is no source that really trains children in school in contemporary Kashmiri history. You don't know what happened because the state narrative is either completely ignores it or just doesn't talk about it. So really everything that is to do with Kashmir lives very orally. It really gives us a sense of who we are, what we've learned. We learn our politics on the street, we learn our history of words, and we learn our culture also in the same way. And what's really lovely about Kashmiri as a language, and this is something I found out when I started doing research on Kashmiri folklore, I went looking for tales, and very often I'd people would be like, oh, we don't remember any tales, there's no stories we remember. But the way you talk and the way they'll be like, oh, do you want to talk about a monster that guards, that comes at midnight? Or do you want to talk about the guardian angel of the house that can sometimes be nasty and throw you out if he doesn't like you? So I just realized that folk belief and this sort of memory of everything otherworldly was really alive in the language, much more than the stories were. So even in Kashmir, even if, someone starts acting a bit odd, it's just very common if we say, oh, yeah, he must have been touched by a spirit, or, must be possession, and maybe we should actually go to someone who can cure him. And, the idea of...
But do you realize that you are becoming the Hesiod of Kashmir?
I really hope so.
Right now, you're living history. In 1,000 years, people will be referring to your works and wondering if you or whoever turns it into fiction, like the Homer. They'll be talking about Hesiod and Homer and they'll be talking about Drabu and I don't know someone else. About Kashmiri. So, get it right. or get it wrong.
Jeff,
1,000 years it won't matter, but if they don't think you're right.
If we survive climate change, then I wish I could come up with really an appropriate Kashmiri idiom for may there be roses to your mouth or something like, oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, may there be roses to your mouth. Because that's really what pushes me to do it, because to be honest, there's a lot happening in Kashmir, and there's a lot of cancel culture and whatever, and I sort of persist despite it, because even there, my God, it's so complicated to say anything, because some side will get you, it'll be the pro-India, pro-Kashmir, anti-elite, like it'll be something or the other that'll get you. But just to be doing this, I feel is really, it is my way of sort of service. And a lot of this has already been done, but it's in Kashmiri, it's in a library, ramshackle, lying in the middle of nowhere. Half of the editions are gone, and I'm just like sitting and photocopying it, and then sitting and translating it to bring it to the world, and to bring it to Kashmiris who can then refer to it. And I think that's been the most magical thing about bringing a book out into the world, is that a lot of people in the diaspora, even in Kashmir, actually found a way of reaccessing their childhood and sort of bringing it to their own kids. And a lot of kids were hearing these stories or reading these stories for the first time. And the book is also written in a way where it almost feels like someone is telling you the story. So I've not really translated them as much as sort of retold them in a way, keeping in the repetition, keeping in the sort of rhyme, almost as though someone's telling you a tale within a tale within a tale.
I think that's great. And I think maybe intuitively we know this, maybe you probably learned at some point, but kids don't care. The same reason the kids there probably aren't paying attention to the folklore or whatever, because kids want to play. But apparently everything was written in poetry and basically in song, because that's people have easier ways to remember that than they do, in regular written form, or written essay form or book form or whatever. And there are people who could recite the entirety of the Odyssey and the Iliad, or the Iliad and the Odyssey rather, just because it was in poetry and in quatrains, and apparently you could have like one symbol and that would lead your brain to click on files, and so that's interesting that you're doing the same thing. Actually, it's not interesting; it makes perfect sense, but it's still interesting at the same time, because we're all of our brains are sort of wired in the same or at least similar ways. I guess without further ado, first of all, I really appreciate that sort of background on everything, and I think the audience will too, because it was a quick primer on the culture, the geography, the history, the trauma, and why this is different. I think it was a good introduction, but obviously we can't do full justice in a podcast form, or at least not this podcast. But let's get into the scary stuff, the fun stuff, the myths, the legends, the folklore, the monsters.
Yes, let us. So when I'm just going to talk about the language a little bit, go back, and then I'll tell you. So one of the things that really stood out to me whenever doing the research on folklore was this word called dapan, and that means it is said. So I wanted that to be the title of my book. My publishers didn't agree, sadly, but I think it would have been a great title, because everything we do in Kashmir starts with dapan. So it's not like there's an unreliable narrative. So you're like, it is said that there is an army camp on the street coming up, but it is also said, it is said that the sun and the moon and the wind were siblings, so you say it all in the same vein of sort of being in the gray zone. It could be this, the rumor is news, but also this it is said rumor is also your belief, is also your quote unquote superstition, is also the way you live your life. So it is said that you don't cut your nails on a Thursday. It is said that you don't walk around trees at night, or it is said that it is said that if you need to pee near a tree, you have to like call out to it and warn it that you're, going to be there, because there could be ghosts around. So there's all sorts of very interesting things with this precursor of dapan, which is it is said. And I think in Kashmiri folklore, what I really love is how different worlds intersect, different worlds of monsters intersect. And some of them you will see in Indian folklore, like the Rantas or the Dun is like the Dayan, it's a woman with like feet turned around with long tresses that cover the body, and she lures men and then eventually eats them. And so that's a common one across North India that is probably the most prominent one.
It's a common
There's
one around
another
the
that's
world. There's creatures
around the world, I think.
in Africa and South America, probably other places as well. And I don't know what's about with the feet turned around. You think it'd be a warning, but
With
men
the feet, right?
Yeah. I mean, I understand that you think that you're following someone, but they're actually following you. I mean, I get the trick of it, but when you look down and you're like, the feet are backwards, I mean, she must be really beautiful. Go, yeah, I could live with that.
No, I don't know what it is with the feet. It's something that really, it's also so ingrained in my childhood. It was so ingrained in me that whenever I'd see a scary looking lady, I'd first look at her feet. And when I was younger, lots of people claimed to have seen this feet turned lady. But I think one of the other ones was there's a bunch in Kashmir that are Brahm Chok and the Vaivuf. They are people who sort of make travelers lose their way. They have a light, and they have a third eye, and they make travelers lose their way when they're on a journey or of some kind. There's another one called the Yaksh, which I think Rakesh and I spoke about a lot, actually, because it's called the Yaksh. It's almost like a foxy creature, and that has a cap, and the cap can be used to control it. So if you have the cap, you control the demon, and it has to do your bidding. But the minute it finds its cap back, it can be really cruel and sort of destroy you and, do all sorts of things for you. There's also a Yeti, because I remember I heard the podcast you did with Rakesh, and you talked about the Yeti a little bit. And that's called the Van Monyu, which is basically like forest man. And in my book, there's a really cruel story about this Yeti / forest man falling in love with a woman who's already married, and then sort of carrying her off into the hills and living a great life with her until her husband and brother show up and beat the Yeti to death and then flubber her to death.
What kind of Yeti gets beaten up by two dudes?
Can you imagine? Oh. It's a domesticated Yeti in love. It's really quite a tragic story, and a really scary story, because the husband and the brother clobber this lady to death. And I thought that was scary.
Well, I guess,
but again, it's a moral.
Don't run off with a Yeti or
exactly.
Whatever. What was the Kashmiri word for the Yeti?
Vandamonyu. It's called Vandamonyu. I don't know if you can say it, but let's try.
It is said, do not run off with a Vandamonio.
It's true, but that's what it is. Do not wander around at night, this is what's going to happen to you, and for men as well.
Perhaps it's said among the Vandamonio, it is said, do not take up with a human woman, or you will become weak and be beaten up by human men.
Yeah.
You're supposed to fear them.
Yes.
You're supposed to eat them. They're not supposed to beat you up. All right, I'm going to get off this.
No, it's really funny, because a lot of the stories are really macabre. One of the stories with the ranchers, the lady with the long hair and the turned feet.
I'm sorry, what is
that,
it called? There was
sort of falls in love with him. Ranchers. Ranchers is the female demon. And so she she finds him on a little.
You can turn off your.
Again, it's interesting. There's a trope in stories called the Khor. Okay. That Khor. Something's happening.
Yeah. Let's see if the signal's better now. So okay. It's something called the code.
The Khor is a guy with a skull head. So I did some research. Turns out in the early 1900s, there was a big fungal infection going on of the head, which would give men a very funny looking scalp disease. And so these guys became the joke of society. And so there's a lot of stories with the Khor as the title character, who is sort of ridiculed and thought of as stupid and, thought of as a loser. And then eventually what happens is that he ends up as the hero of the story. And in this story, this Khor is trapped by the Rantas 3 times in a row. and taken with him taken with her in her little bag, and she takes him home and sort of falls in love with him and doesn't want him to leave, until eventually one day he basically sort of pretends to be in love with her and pretends to just sort of be the best husband and so on, and she's pounding the meat to make some meatballs in a mortar and pestle that's gigantic, and he catches onto her hair, puts the head in the mortar and pestle, and sort of pounds her head until it becomes like a chutney. And I thought that was a really gross tale to tell kids.
Yeah, that is gross.
Yeah, and that's how he...
Is she the one with the backwards feet?
She is the woman with the backwards feet, and she turns out has a lot of jewels and gems that he then takes off and lives his best life.
So these two creatures, the sort of the fool, the mischievous fool, got lured in by the backwards foot. I don't know witch type or harpy.
Yes.
And but by getting her to lower her guard, he got the better of her and ran off with her wealth.
Basically, that's the story. And this is the third time over, because he's still
a monster of some sort, right?
He's a regular person
He's just a fool.
with a disease. He's just a fool, but actually not the fool. It ends up being like everyone underestimates this guy and thinks him a fool, but eventually he turns out to be sort of clever or the hero. So there's a lot of that kind of subversion happening in a lot of these stories, where the core ends up as the winner in these tales.
I mean, is he just someone that is like leprosy or like whatever the Elephant Man had, where his head is deformed? Is that sort of a way of explaining? You should give those.
I think that's the closest. That's the closest way, 100%, 100%. The other one that I want to talk about is called the Tasrufdar, which is, Kashmir is full of streams and rivers and lots of, at least it used to be, still is in the rural areas. But we have these big trees called the chinars, which are like the maple, and we have these big poplar trees, and we often have a lot of streams in the villages and lots of small rivers and really nice alcoves. So this is a character that one haunts around these streams and areas, and especially at night, he scares those who water plants, and he pretends to be a landowner and bothers poor farmers. So he sort of uses a disguise. Again, a very interesting way of sort of keeping people in their homes, and women, especially brides, were not allowed to go to, let's say, the river at night. So this was a way of keeping them in, that the Tasrufdar will come and get you in some way or the other, or fool you. So that's another character that has a very specific role to play in policing women.
But he looks like a regular person. He's just, and he.
Yes.
He basically looks like he's husbanding the trees, watering them, taking care of them. But when he finds wayward women running into the forest, he goes all Jack the Ripper on them.
Yes, basically. I love your way of explaining what I cannot.
Well, I'm speaking to a primarily American, Australian, Canadian, European who presumably speaks English. Language. I'm trying to put in ways that I understand in the assumption that they also either think along the same lines or at least would understand the references I'm making. And I'm also trying to confirm that I'm understanding, that I'm not just hearing you but listening to you correctly.
No, this is great. Okay, this is great. So a lot of times what also happens is that to keep these monsters at bay, you need to keep them happy and you need to feed them. Like the yaksh, there's a specific food that you give them. You give the yaksh and you keep it on, I think with the yaksh, if I'm not wrong, you make a dish of like lentils and rice, so a little bit like a dal with rice, and you put it on a plate of dry grass and you leave it outside the compound to feed it on specifically a moonless night. So that's for the yaksh. There's another one for the dev, which is the dev of Persian folklore, which is a cannibal giant. And for that, I think on weddings, for that creature.
We can't just say dev and cannibal giant and we have to pause and talk a little bit more about Dev and Cannibal Giant. So how giant, how cannibal, what's it look like? I mean, sharp teeth, does it have horns? Is it just a big person? I mean, what are we looking at here?
Yes, so think of a devil, and think of a devil with a large, immense head on his shoulders, big bulging eyes. It's usually used as the word for demon or devil. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of stories involve it appearing out of somewhere, doing its stretching, coming out of like a river or one big thing. In Kashmiri folklore, there is the world, there is the earth, what we call, and then there is something underground called the Tal Patal, which is the underworld, and that's where a lot of these creatures live. And in Kashmiri folklore, it's an interesting mishmash of underworld. What lives is the Nagas, the serpent beings, the half serpent, half human, who can sort of change at will. They live, and then the Dev can also live underwater. The Paris, which are the fairies, they also live underwater. So the Dev really often sometimes emerges from a river, could be, it can be transformed into a stone, and then, comes out from a stone, stretches, yawns, eats a few humans, and then sort of, I don't know if that makes him cannibal because it's a human eating thing, but maybe it is a cannibal. I don't know.
Well, it doesn't. It sounds like it's a devil, so it's not really human. It's supernatural, so it's not.
It's not really human.
I mean, it'd be like a monster eating us. So this is interesting. So how is the underworld pronounced?
It's called Tal Patal or Patal.
Okay, Tal Patal. But it's not like an underworld like Hades, like the land of the dead. It's more of almost like a hollow earth, almost like where a parallel place where the monsters live and come out from. So you said that there's fairies down there, and there's sort of mer creatures or more reptilian or half reptilian that can shapeshift that come out. I mean, this might be the origin of the legends of the reptilians that occupy the earth. This might be what turned into the seraphim and all of that. Or maybe, in fact, there are reptilians under there. I mean, I know a lot of people who believe that there's reptilians, living under the earth that are active or in some sort of hibernation. One of my favorite childhood movies was this movie Gargoyles. I think it's from 1972, and they said that every 10,000 years these gargoyles would awake and lay their clutch of eggs and then go away again. But that's cool, and they're all in the water. Which, I mean, water, I happen to know in a lot of religions, but Indo-European, but also going eastward, water is sort of chaos. And I imagine that water was a scary place, and with climates being different and with there being more animals, you had your eels, you had your crocodiles, and your alligators, your hippopotamus, and probably poisonous jellyfish, and all other things that could kill you under the water. And it's probably easier for something that couldn't kill you on land to kill you underwater because it's not your natural habitat. It's there. So, you're also fighting the buoyancy and the current and whatever else is going on there. So, water, it probably is stay away from the water. It's not necessarily, safe to go there alone or at certain parts of the day or month or, stay away from the rapids.
No, 100%. And in Kashmir, I think it's more than being scared of it. It is water being sacred, because especially for, the pre-Islamic time, the Nags, which are the springs, which is the word for spring, as well as for the half serpent, half human being, is a water body. It's a spring. It's a clearing of water, and often it's in in the middle of a forest or something like that. And these were sources of sustenance, but they're also seen as portals into the underworld. And so these are treated as very sacred spaces. So you cannot make noise, you cannot litter, you cannot cause any disturbance around the nags, because then you would be affected by a spirit. Even the fish of a spring are not allowed to be eaten. So they're not to be eaten, only looking at them is allowed, because they're seen as sacred. So you can have a lake fish, but you cannot have a spring fish. And so these half snake, half human creatures in the origin story of Kashmir was seen as the original beings of Kashmir.
Sorry, are you there?
They're seen as, yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
I just had a bad cough.
Okay. Because we turned the camera off, I couldn't tell. That's fine.
Yes. So in the origin story of Kashmir, there was a big demon. It was a big lake. The whole of Kashmir Valley was a big lake, and it had a demon called Jalodbhav who lived there, and no humans were allowed there, and only pishachis, pishachis are also a category of demon, which I don't know how I can describe them, but they basically, yeah, they're also, I don't know how I can describe them. They're not nags, but they're kind of dangerous demons who will not let humans inhabit the same place as them. So humans could imagine living near this demon called Jalodbhav, because he would annihilate them or eat them or whatever. And the lake was just full of nags and the pishachis.
What do they look like?
So what happened? Pishachis, I don't know what they look like, because there's very little on them, because they do. It's a Sanskritic. I think it's a Sanskrit origin demon, and I think it has the traditional Indian imagery has like them as big teeth. These two the incisors, are they called the side teeth? It has it like big and curved. Yeah, the canines. Yes. And big curly hair, big bulging eyes. They're fully like gray. And that's how they've been depicted through really, really scary and horrific. And they have these like this red mouth and big teeth.
Sounds
so they're
an ogre with different color.
Do you know what? Let me just send you a picture, and you can see what it looks like. If you just go to this link, you can probably have a look at it and probably see what it. I don't know how best to.
You're the author. You've got to describe it. So this is your chance to actually create history.
It is, but in Kashmir, they're not really part of everyday folklore except the origin myths, and this is a lot of the rest of India that depicts them this way. Do you see what I mean?
Sure.
So for us, they're just a demonic entity, and we don't fully know what they look like.
But I see the images. They're very Eastern looking. They look a little bit like the Chinese dragons on the head, except their faces like a matte gray, almost black, big bulbous eyes. Their canines come out, and they're almost like tusks. There's curvature. In some images, they have 6 arms in addition to 2 legs, but not all. In some, they're 2 arms, 2 legs. Definitely big teeth, big mouths. In some places, very elongated ears and different, anywhere version of sort of your elvish vampiric pointed ears to, in others, almost like a shell that has serrated edges all around. There's lots. I could see why you're having trouble describing, because there's lots of different images, and while they have similarities, there's everything from almost like a winged, bear wolf with a lionine tail or tiger's tail. So it is sort of all over the place. But they are scary.
Yeah.
You would not confuse this. There is one image where you might confuse it with a man, but it looks like sort of like a zombie, almost like a revenant. But in others, the legend of the Pashika or Pashicha. You would know. You don't want to go near this thing.
Yeah.
And apparently it doesn't, you're not allowed to. And so your instincts would be correct to stay far away.
To stay far away, absolutely. So these are the demons that basically lived in Kashmir until a saint by the name of Kashyap Rishi decided to come and pray to the god Vishnu. I think he prayed to Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the three Indian deities. And upon hearing the story of the demon, Vishnu became a boar and struck a mountain near Kashmir that basically opened up an opening for the lake to rush out. And then the demon had to escape. Then he sort of came in and, sat in what is now a lake. But again, another goddess called the goddess Sharika, which is a prominent goddess in Kashmir. There's lots of temples for her. She disguised as a little bird and dropped a pebble that grew bigger and bigger and bigger and buried the monster under it. And now this pebble and this mountain still is the mountain that sort of frames the most famous lake in Kashmir called the Dal Lake, and we see it every day. The sun sets behind it every day. So it has a little origin story as well. So we have an origin story of how Kashmir became Kashmir, and all the water in we started the conversation with water and the tussle for water, but the biggest river in Kashmir, the Jhelum, is supposed to be basically the goddess Parvati, who the Lord Shiva asked, and to flow through the valley to cleanse it, and that's the river Vyat or Vitasta or Jhelum. It cleanses the valley of Kashmir, and that's the origin story for a lot of the topography that exists in Kashmir today. And Kashmir is an evolution of the name of the saint Kashyapa. It started being called Kashyap Marg and then eventually became Kashmir. We don't know how that happened, but it did. That's what they say. That's what it is said.
Well, you had thousands of years for that language to drift. So, we don't need to figure that part out. Maybe you do for the book, but we don't today. So, are the nags the sort of half serpent, half person? Is that like the equivalent of a dragon, or is there no equivalent of a dragon, or is there?
No, there isn't an equivalent of the dragon. I don't think there's anyone that deals with fire really, but the half serpent, half humans have like a full civilization underworld. The title story of my book actually is a story about the king of the Nags falling in love with a human lady and then sort of taking her underwater, and then everyone can smell her because she's human, and then all the other Nag wives, the serpent wives, conspire against her and sort of throw her out, and then they kill her, but she leaves. And then when he finds out she's died, he also tries to leave, and then eventually a saint finds both of them and burns them both in the same pyre so that they can be reunited in another life. So it's, again, a tragic story.
Sure. It's also the Little Mermaid, except in reverse, and more Grimm's fairy tales than Disneyfied.
Yes. 100%. I'd never thought of the Little Mermaid. That's so interesting, and I don't know how I missed that. But it really is. It really is very much like the Little Mermaid.
This is the value that I add.
No, it's wonderful, actually. Wow, I do not know how I missed this. I've been working on the story for a decade and literally never thought of the Little Mermaid.
Well, you're welcome. Is there like a vampire or a werewolf?
There is a werewolf, and the werewolf is called, I think the werewolf is the closest equivalent to the werewolf. Let me just read. It's a nocturnal creature, only described in stories. It's an animal similar to a cat or dog moving around desolate houses. Others think it's a midget. And again, the powers of this creature lie in the cap. If you control it using its cap, if you capture its cap, you control it. It's very sly. It doesn't happen often because it's a very wily creature. It's really cunning, sharp with it. But that's the closest to the werewolf in Kashmir. I think the werewolf sounds like that also.
So now we have two different creatures who wear caps, and if you have their caps,
yes,
you control them. So obviously there's something about if you control the head, you control the heart. But what are these caps that they're wearing? So when I think of caps, I think of, a baseball cap, but obviously there wasn't baseball back then. So is it like a fez? Is it like a yarmulke? Is it like a cowboy hat or a cavalier hat or what do we wear here that you can I guess you sneak up behind it and take it and control the foul beast?
You know what I think when I think of this is, do you remember Aladdin and his monkey Abu?
Sure.
Abu has like a tiny little cap, which is kind of like a fez, and that's what I think of. That's the exact image that comes to my mind when I think of these.
So all these monsters have to do to avoid being taken advantage of by humans is just change their fashion choices. It's just like, go
change their fashion choices.
I'm not wearing a hat today. God damn it, I'm not wearing a hat today. Okay, well that seems like
I'm letting my hair loose today. Yeah, that seems. Maybe that's why we haven't seen them in a while. Maybe that's what fashion evolved, and nobody's seen a yaksh or a werewolf ever since.
Yeah, it sounds like what these monsters need is like fashionistas, like designers to plan different outfits that don't involve ensembles and accessories that can lead to their being controlled by us lesser mortals. Are they immortal or can they? I mean, obviously the Yeti was beaten to death, but aside from beaten to death, do they live forever, or do they regenerate, or is they too broad? Is it very do they have different, like these nags? Do they live for like 10,000 years, a million years, or do they have a normal lifespan?
Yeah, so I think the nags are the only ones that I can for sure say don't have a normal lifespan. The others, not so much. I don't know very much. But the nags are supposed to be sort of immortal, they're supposed to live forever or live indefinite.
So those again are reptilian sort of, mer creatures, but they're not mer. They're reptile creatures. I just don't know any equivalent, dragon people, whatever. We'll just call them or alligator.
Yeah.
And they're sort of the immortals, but the others, they live parallel to us. But as we've learned, several of them absolutely do not want you anywhere near their territory. So we live parallel, but separate and distinct.
Separate, and I think Deves and Paris also, I think, live forever, and they can sleep for hundreds of years, and be awakened if someone drops a magical lamp or something like that. So I think a little bit like a genie. I think Deves have things to do with objects, so they can sort of put their heart in an object, or it's a little bit like Horcruxes, from Harry Potter, Horcruxes. So they can sort of
from Harry Potter.
Yeah,
I thought you were saying hookers.
Yes.
What?
Oh no, Horcruxes. Okay. So they put their heart in a lamp or something.
Not a Harry Potter guy, but now I need to clarify. Not a hooker guy either, but I just know that word as opposed to the Harry Potter word. The things that I worry about. All right. So in all of what we've talked about here, I didn't hear sort of a typical monster that seems to be eternal and universal, and that's the monster that sort of takes the babies, kills babies, sort of, I guess, to explain stillbirth or sudden infant death syndrome, or kids getting diseases, basically at within the first, few months or first years of life. Do you have your sort of, your Lilith monster?
No, actually, I don't think I do. I can't think of a single one from my list that I think specifically comes at sort of birth. I don't know. Maybe I've missed something. Because we have.
Do you have? I mean, this is probably a stupid question, but I don't know how else to ask it. But does Kashmir not have that history of terrible infant mortality? Is it just a luckier bunch, or maybe your birthing techniques were better than everyone around you? I don't know how else to ask it.
No, I don't know. Actually, this is a question.
Or maybe just more rationally, just like kids, they're brittle.
Oh no,
this is hard.
We're definitely not rational. Okay. We're definitely not rational. Maybe But maybe it is, we haven't talked about jinns, but I think jinns are like everywhere in the Islamic world. Maybe it could be jinns or the evil eye, which is a big one in Kashmir, that anything unfortunate that happens can be explained by the evil eye.
So it's funny because people think about the evil eye and they think about, the talismans from Turkey and Greece and basically Mediterranean. But that's not really an evil eye. That's actually the protective eye. It's almost more like the eye of Horus.
Protective eye.
As you get west, it's, even Odin sacrificed, his eye for wisdom. The evil eye is different, even though it's associated with, well, now we say Romani. You're not allowed to say gypsies anymore. But although there's a whole lot of Romanians who are not, anyway, not important. So the evil eye and the jinns. Let's hear. But let's talk about those. And by let's talk about them, I mean you.
Me, yes.
Yes.
Now that sorry, I'm just going to go back to the previous question. Now that you're thinking, I don't think of a monster that is for children, but there is definitely rituals. There are rituals that we do. If a child is born and like passes a certain age, there are like spiritual rituals you do to sort of thank the gods that the child made it this far. Mm-hmm. So so there's one called Kandur. That's the one that comes to mind. But okay, so the evil eye, so Kashmir, interestingly, I'd like to read you a quote if I can find it quickly, by Marco Polo, and this is from his travelogues. And he writes that, Kashmiri people are people who are idolaters with a language of their own, with an astonishing acquaintance with the devilries of enchantment, insomuch as they make their idols speak. They also, with their sorceries, can bring on changes to the weather, produce darkness. Indeed, this country is the very original source from which idolatry has spread abroad. It's really interesting because Kashmir to this day has like a very serious situation with sort of dark magic, with black magic, with spells and all these sorts of things, which I've really tried to investigate, but I've sort of kept a little bit of a distance from because it's scary. But a lot of this is explained in Kashmir, all sorts of misfortunes, all sorts of bad things happening to people, is often explained by saying that, oh, someone's cast a spell on us, someone's done something evil on us, or it could be involuntary, nazar, which is, what we say as evil eye. Nazar means sight in Kashmiri, but also it could mean the eye or the evil eye is that if I see your really nice t-shirt and I'm like, oh, what a nice t-shirt, Jeff, and then tomorrow you find a hole in it, it's probably that I was not bad intentioned, but my evil eye got your t-shirt. Really harmless.
So the evil eye is more chaotic than focused?
Than focused, yes. And it doesn't need to have intention. So I could just really admire something and it could break the next day, and that's my evil eye hitting it.
Now it's interesting.
Even though I'm probably...
At the risk of being politically incorrect, the term gypsy, which was a slur, was also a misnomer because the people who, created that acronym thought that because the people looked closer to those of the Middle East and specifically Egypt, they called them gypsies for Egyptians. But the origins of the gypsies, now called Romani, or at least non-European Romani, because you have to be careful these days, like you said, is from India. And maybe it's not from India, maybe it's from Kashmir, or maybe there's just some similarities, and it's both. And maybe the evil eye actually was transmitted from, your part of the world into that part of the world, and just the misnomer gypsy took over. And so the evil eye did in fact transfer.
Interesting, because I think that, but again, it's really common across the Arab world, across the Persian world. In Italy, you have all sorts of charms and so on for the evil eye. In India, all over you have it, in South Asia. So I suppose it's pretty universal at this point. But yeah, so Kashmir has a big scene, should I call it, of like dark magic spells, and it seems that even to this day, people do go to these sort of practitioners to do spells, to cast spells on like other people, and there's all sorts of crazy things that they do, all sorts of crazy spells they write, and they use like fire, they use dead fish and nails and so on, and that's a really, really big one in Kashmir. And it is said again that the people who actually do this control jinns, and that's where the jinns come in from the Islamic universe. And it's the jinns that do the work for them.
Oh, so the jinns are sort of the evil. Are they spirits? Are they like ethereal? Are they, gaseous, non-corporeal, or do they have bodies?
Jinns don't have bodies. Jinns are sort of gaseous, non-corporeal, as you'd call them. They exist in another dimension. They're supernatural beings, could be spirits, demons. They often hide in uninhabited places. They're often also visible to those with like a sixth sense, and then they can sort of control jinns. And if you control a jinn, if a jinn becomes your friend, then it can do things for you.
How do you control the jinn? I mean, you can't take its cap off because
I think
it's like a ghost.
I think that's a bit complicated.
I mean, it's not like Aladdin
and
where
I think
you free it from a lamp, and you get 3 wishes. I mean, that seems
no. That'd be really easy. I'd like one, but this one seems to come from like some sort of tradition or spiritual. I mean, I don't know if it's spiritual practice, but it is kind of spiritual practice. So a lot of I suppose practice in a particular line. So there seem to be lineages that sort of do this.
So it's the a secret society or secret knowledge, some type of witchcraft or magic enables you to do control over a spirit. As you call it black magic here, probably there too. I had a question because you mentioned
here as well. Yeah.
Are the gods the same gods of the Vedic Indian, the Mahabharata and all the the 33 million gods, the Indra, the Krishna, the Kali? I mean, or does Kashmir have its own panoply?
So it has most Kashmiris believe are devotees of Shiva. So that's Shiva's the big god, and then there's all of the others as well, and to various degrees, there's sort of local manifestations of them as well. But Kashmiri Shaivism is really the main Hindu god, and then for the majority, which is probably more than 90%, it's Islam, so it's Muslims. Right. But in Kashmiri Islam, what's interesting is that there is a massive, I don't know if I'd call it saint worship, but there's a big phenomenon of worshipping at the graves of saints, with living saints, and a lot of the saints, again, to counter black magic, there is sort of quote unquote white magic, where a spiritual being, a saint, a peer, will actually cure you of your black magic. So he or she promises to cure you of black magic if you go to them. So there's, now some call it an industry, and it really could be potentially, because there's lots of like frauds that do these things. Where people pay allegiance to a saint, living saint, dead saint, so on, who then they basically become followers of. So it's a little bit like a cult, not quite, but a little bit like a cult. And through Kashmir's history, a lot of these saints have also been poets. And they have been poets in the way that they disperse their message through poetry and through oral poetry, and often illiterate. They have gone on to become some serious poets of Kashmiri literature. And that's sort of what I'm working on next that I'm excited about. But it's really metaphysical poetry.
I'm a little bit caught up on the word saint, because saint to me seems very Christian. I wasn't aware that there were Islamic saints. Is it just a convenient word, or is that the word that's used, or is it non-Islamic at all? It's something else.
No, it is Islamic, but okay, maybe not. I wouldn't. In Kashmir, we call them peers, peer. But I think saint is sort of how I translate it, but it could be sage as well, if that makes sense, like a sage / saint.
So somewhere more. So maybe like someone who practices in good magic?
Yes, exactly. Someone who practices good magic, has an elevated sense of powers, has premonition, has all these like gifts from God, and then also uses those gifts to, preach to his followers, her followers. I've been to one of these, and I can not even classify her as a sage. There's another category in Kashmir called the mot, which is, I don't know how best to. Let me just look up yeah, there you go. The definition I've written, because it's a complicated one. A mot, or a mats, the feminine, is a madman or a madwoman, an ascetic, enraptured, detached from the real world. Often it could be someone who acts very, very different from social order, from social norms, but has some kind of spiritual power. So I went to one of these ladies who's supposed to be a mats, the feminine of a mot, and you'll go see her, and she's smoking her pipe, smoking her tobacco, just sitting with, and it's an Islamic saint. So she's sitting with her head uncovered or whatever, and she's like cussing at people. She's talking in riddles. She'll tell you, oh, this is wrong with you. She'll ask you to take off your clothes. So she'll be like, nice shirt, give it to me. And then she'll like take it off of you. She'll be like, nice necklace, give it to me. And then she'll give your necklace to someone else. So she sort of does this really odd redistribution of things in this big room that she sits in. So she's kind of there, but kind of not there, There's a very like faint line between sanity and insanity in this situation. And hundreds of people visit her every day. Someone brings her bread, she gives it to another, and the other takes it as if, it's food from the gods, and thinks he is cured by having a piece of this bread. So there's a very interesting living heritage, which is slowly sort of disappearing, because you don't see a lot of these mot/saint, sage, peer people anymore, but it's still kind of living in Kashmir. And that's what I mean when I say saint.
I understand. So, it's sort of your mad hermit in the forest or witch of the wood kind of thing, but he or she is in town, but they whatever the norms are, they do almost the exact opposite of it, and basically control the room to so that everybody knows that they're the leader of the room and the ritual. So sort of a little bit like John the Baptist, sort of like the madman prophet in the desert kind of thing.
Really, yeah, very much like that. Yeah.
All right, very good.
And it's interesting now with the digital world, you see like videos of them on YouTube, because now, without the space, it does look a bit strange,
I'm sure.
Without the atmosphere. Yeah.
But it's supposed to look strange. All sort of witchcraft rituals are always in, with candles and circles and stars and incense and burning of different kinds of senses. It's supposed to take you someplace else, so you feel like you're going through something very different, and someone else is taking you through it. So they're the clear leader. They know what's going on. You don't know what's going on. I imagine if you went to like 10 or 12 of these in a short period of time, you'd sort of see repetition and patterns and start to figure it out. And so maybe they have to change them from time to time. I don't know. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to pen and teller any sort of. We'll just act like it's completely real, and it is in fact some type of witchcraft, which can be either good or bad, or, as I've been told, can be neutral as well. Is there any thing that I didn't ask you about that I absolutely should have?
No, I think we're okay. I think we covered a fair bit, actually, across time, across genre.
How old? I know this is probably impossible to tell exactly, but how old has there been a region called Kashmir?
Oh, the second Buddhist conference, the second Buddhist council was held in Kashmir, and that was in 300 BC. I don't know, So there's evidence of the second Buddhist council. So this is me being really ignorant, but I'm sure there's stuff before that. But I think the earliest physical remains of Kashmir, an archaeological site, which was Neolithic, which is 3000 BC, I think, was excavated in Kashmir. So that could be the earliest kind of civilization there, if that makes sense. like a Neolithic site. But I also know that there was a Buddhist conference in 300 BC. So I don't know if that sort of gives you scale.
And this, I could be completely way off on this, but is Kashmir in part of the area where in prehistoric, whatever that means, times, was part of the Harappa or Harappan culture?
No, I think Harappa is quite further out.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's a site that was discovered in the valley. It was, it's called Burzahom, and that's what I know. Sorry, I'm really bad at this, so I wouldn't know. But what would be interesting is that if listeners are interested, one of the things actually that I did want to mention is Salman Rushdie's Harun and the Sea of Stories, his book that he wrote, which is sort of like a children's novel, talks about the Sea of Stories. That's based on Kashmiri folklore, and that's a very, 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 very popular
Who's the author?
Book that Salman Rushdie.
Oh, yeah, I guess I should have heard of him.
You probably have heard of him somewhere. But that book incorporates elements from Kashmiri folklore, and that's based on one of the earliest stories called the Katha Sarit Sagar, which is known to sort of also be the origin of a lot of Panchatantra stories. It's an 11th century collection of Indian legends and folk tales that originate in Kashmir.
Okay, well, I mean, it sounds like a good place. And Salman Rushdie, I guess depending on who you are, if you're listening to the show, you probably think he deserves some support. If you're not listening to the show, or you are by accident, you're probably like, absolutely don't support this guy. Whatever. If you want to buy the book, buy the book. Okay, here is what I hope is not a stupid question, but may end up being one. Kashmir, there's the wool Kashmir, Kashmere. Is that at all tied to where you're from, Kashmir?
That's an interesting question that I've been trying to investigate, because some of the best Kashmir actually comes from Mongolia, So yes and no, because the best Kashmir, like the Pashmina, the Kashmiri shawl stuff, comes from Ladakh, which is a bit north of Kashmir, but it's kind of in the same region. It's kind of same.
Is that because those animals live on that giant, like, high desert, and they have to have the giant coats?
Exactly.
So where is it like some sort of? Is it from a yak or a musk oxen?
It's from a goat. It's
a high goat. Just a high goat.
Just a high goat. Yeah, just a high goat. But Kashmir is famous for its shawls, which are made from these. The Kashmir scarves are made from this wool from these goats. But the jumpers that you probably see are actually not made in Kashmir, which is interesting, because the wool that's used for Pashmina, which is from Ladakh, and which is the one used for shawls, cannot actually make jumpers. And this is something I found out very recently because I was doing research for my Kashmiri artisanal brand, and I wanted to make jumpers, and turns out you cannot make jumpers. So the jumper stuff comes from Mongolia because it's a rougher wool that can be knit, and the one that comes from Kashmir can only be hand spun, and it's very delicate. It's probably the really soft scarves that you see.
Is Samarkand anywhere near there? Like, where's Tamerlane or Timur the
Yeah.
Is that anywhere near Kashmir?
It's the source of a lot of Kashmiri craftsmanship, because a lot of crafts people came who taught Kashmiris, papier-mâché, who taught wood carving, and a lot of craft came from there. So back in the 13th, 14th century, there was a lot of trade, and a lot of people came there who then ended up converting a lot of Kashmiris to Islam. So while it's not really, geographically super close, it's on the way, and there has been historic trade.
Yeah, I know that Samarkand was the capital of an empire for a while. I think it was Islamic, but Timur claimed that he was a descendant of Genghis Khan, and I guess it was called at that point, it wasn't called the Mongol Empire, it was called the Mughal Empire at that point. I think I have it right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you have it
and
right.
since you said the Silk Road, I mean, obviously a lot of things would be wherever you're on the Silk Road in any metropolitan area, you're gonna be trading cultural stories, and whenever you trade cultural things, there's cultural, what we call now, appropriation. So maybe that's where the stuff from Mongolia came, and that was the junction point, and it was in Kashmir. Maybe there's the basis of the name, and it became anglicized. Who knows? I don't know. Somebody knows. But it's neither of us. So
somebody knows.
So that's good. What is like? is there a city or town that we like? What's the capital of Kashmir?
Srinagar.
Can you say it again? I'm sorry.
Srinagar.
Okay.
Srinagar. Yeah.
Yeah. That's news to me, which is fine. But all right.
Which is fine. Which you'll hopefully one day come to.
Yeah, maybe one day. Who knows? Truth be told, I'll probably only go to Ecuador, and other than that, I don't know that I will voluntarily leave the United States. So mostly because I'm lazy and don't want to, go through passports and currency exchanges and things like that. But enough about me being an ugly American. The listeners can cover that for years and years and years. So I'm sure into the future and into the past, and make their own judgments on that. All right. We've gone about an hour and a half. I know that we had some tech problems in there, so it's not really quite that much, but that's a long time for you to speak, and that's about the usual length of the show. But I think we covered a whole lot in this show, from things that are important to the mundane, from history, geography, to monsters. We got you on that Little Mermaid thing, which maybe will help you in your stuff, and we gave you a couple new projects to look into on your book, so that you can become the Kashmiri version of Hesiod one day, as being the authority in these things. You and Salman Rushdie. So there you go. That's pretty lofty.
That is really lofty, and that is the hope. But thank you so much. This has been really lovely, and it really has sparked so many ideas that I cannot wait to get started on.
Oh, well, great. I thank you. I mean, yes, it's been lovely, and it's been a great introduction to an area that is, exotic to me, and a lot of things I didn't know. It's fun to know some of the things are familiar, but some of the things are completely different. But most importantly, where can people find you, follow you, buy your stuff, support you?
Yes.
If you want to be found and followed.
I do. I am on Twitter as my first name, DONAIZAD. And I'm on Instagram, and I would love it if people are interested in South Asian literature. I run a website called darkvaak.com. That's DAAKVAAK.com. It's a repository of South Asian literature and art, and we cover a lot of folklore. And the Instagram handle is DAAKVAAK, and we share a lot of stories of South Asia. So anyone interested in South Asia, literature, art, history, that's the place I'd recommend people.
Excellent. So the information is there. And if you email it to me, I will try to remember to put it into the show notes. That way they don't have to be writing this down and rewinding and putting on slower speed and all that stuff. So folks, thank you for paying attention. And you can follow me at IcarusFellMD on X, which is Twitter. You can follow me on Facebook. Garden of Doom has a Facebook page, not a group, but a page, and I do try to put content there on a daily basis. And if you like the show, please subscribe. And if you're on Spotify or Apple, 5 stars and a review really helps us. But what helps us the most? Referring the show to your friends and family. And I don't care if you steal their phones and you subscribe without telling them. It's fine. It's okay. I give you permission. But remember, I am subject to the laws of the Garden of Doom. You are subject to the laws of whatever state or country you are in. With that, very thankful to our guest. Once again, thank you. And thank you for all of you who are listening. And you'll hear from us again next week in the Garden of Doom.